Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got another quick Ask the Nick video. Drew T asks, what are some knives that every serious collector has to own? That's a really good question there, Drew T. Let's talk about that. I'm gonna say, I don't believe that you should own anything that you don't love, and so for a lot of these things, if they're not your style, leave them alone. But I think even just handling some of these knives in a store or at a meetup would be good and would give you the sense that I'm really trying to get to. And of course, there are plenty that should be on this list that aren't, so don't hate me, and there are some that I don't have on the table at the moment, so don't hate me for that either. Frankly, just don't hate me in general, we'll be good to go. But let's just jump into it. For me, absolutely number one is actually the Open L. Open Ls are an old school traditional sort of knife, but in a lot of ways they're a great starting point. They're great slices, they're great little knives, 100%, and for the price they're really hard to beat. And so I think to be a knife guy you need to know Open L at the very least. Next one would be the Ontario Rat number 1, or Rat number 2 for that matter. This helps to give you a really nice perspective on what's available on the lower end. This knife for $35 blows away a whole bunch of other knives at, 50 or $100. So that's good to see that around there. Next thing I'll say is like the Kershaw Blur or Leek. I don't happen to have either of those available, although you can see reviews for the Blur yesterday, as a matter of fact. And they're both very nice knives. They show what Kershaw is doing kind of at their best, an inexpensive knife that's still pretty decent. I don't tend to like the Leek, but that's a separate issue entirely. Next on the list for me is the Spyderco Dragonfly. These tend to be fairly inexpensive, and they're a great ergonomic showpiece. They're also a really great smaller knife. These are my go-to recommendation for people who want to carry something small but still effective. Speaking of Spyderco, the Spyderco Delica or the Endura is another really great choice here, because the Delica is an incredible knife. I've got a bunch of videos about it, but frankly, if I had to carry a Delica the rest of my life and this was the only knife possible, I would be okay with that. This is just so damn good. Next thing I'm going to say might surprise some, but I'm going to say the Cold Steel Recon 1 Code 4. These are both knives that are very kind of emblematic of what cold steel can kind of do as practical everyday use blades. I've reviewed the Code 4 before. I haven't had a Recon 1 yet, but it shows off the triad lock, and it kind of shows off what cold steel does when they make a small pocket knife. Don't love them necessarily, but there's still something you should check out. Next thing on the list for me is the Spyderco PM2 here, Paramilitary 2. This is a great knife, absolutely a solid gem, and it shows a lot of things off. It shows off the compression lock, it shows off Spyderco's ergonomic sense. It's just that there's so much to love about the PM2 that I think everybody should own one, or at the very least, handle one for a good long time. Next on the list is going to be the Benchmade Griptilian here. I got this guy on loan from my buddy Adam. Thank you, Adam. And this is sort of another iconic knife, and it's a really common everyday carry knife, so you at least need to be familiar with it, even if it's not something that you love necessarily. Speaking of Benchmade, the Benchmade 940 is another great knife in that sense, because it's about as iconic as Benchmade has in terms of knives. The 940 is kind of the Benchmade, and in a lot of ways it's a high watermark for their product line when they're done right. And so a 940, 941, 942, whatever, it's all good. You should check those out. So there you go. As we go higher in price, the ZT452CF comes to mind for me. This is a silly knife in many ways. It's huge, it's murdery, it's ridiculous, but it also has a really incredible action by production standards and frankly by mid-tech standards as well. It's beautifully designed, it's great in the hand, and it's really emblematic of some of the very best of what ZT does. Another ZT that I think everyone should check out is the 0562CF. This is a Endura knife. It's more expensive, around $260, but it's really astoundingly well done. It's a great working tool. And it really, I think it captures everything that ZT aspires to be, which are really beefy, hard-use sorts of tools with good designs and great action. And that's what the 562 has in spades. This is more style. The 562 is a little bit more substance. Next one may blow people away entirely, but the Cold Steel Espada XL. I've got a review of that guy up, and honestly, I don't think this is a knife that you should own. I don't really even think, but you need to handle one at some point in time, because only by handling the Espada XL did I truly understand what cold steel was about. Did it truly occur to me that this is that is their thing? It is just predicated on that notion of just joyous jackassery, if you will. And so the Espada XL for me really sums up the soul of cold steel, and as a result, I think it's something a true knife geek should probably have a look at. Next on the list is, certainly I may have a bias here, but the Spyderco Slysz Bowie is another knife that I think everybody should at least check out, both because it offers really good value in terms of titanium frame locks, but it also has great details, great design. This knife is spectacular in a variety of ways, and I really think it should be getting a lot more love in the knife community than it already is, although it gets a lot of love anyways. The next one is not at all controversial. The Chris Reeve Knives Large Sebenza is an incredible knife, if nothing else, in its position in the community. The Large Sebenza is an icon. It is a piece of knife-making history. It's one of the earlier, really popular implementations of the integral lock, and it's a great knife overall. It also shows off a level of smoothness that is fairly hard to find, although you can get it in things like the Bowie as well. But everybody needs to own or at least handle a Sebenza before you can really start talking about smoothness and other sorts of, just that this sort of knife is tool aesthetic that the Sebenza has in spades. Next one up there is, I would recommend that everybody handles something with a really super smooth action. So whether it's like a Grimsmo Norseman here, which has this incredible drop shot action, also Shirogorov, like the Shiro Neons are great in this way, or Thorburn Custom can also do the trick. But something with an incredible drop shotty action. If you need a budget substitute, even the Ontario Carta Prime's not a bad choice. But I think any one of these sorts of knives, all you really need to do is handle it, but it'll give you that sense of, oh my god, that's frictionless. And it'll help to calibrate kind of your high end for a smooth false shot bearing action. Because if you just think that, the ZT452 is as good as it gets, I mean, it's pretty damn good, but compared to this, it's really nothing. It's entirely different. Then I think that you really should handle some sort of a high-end custom folder, just so you can kind of see the good, the bad, and the ugly of a high-end custom handmade folder, because they are both very, very nice in a lot of ways, but they're very, very different. You've moved from the land of functional tool, and you're more into the land of art. And it took me handling a couple of high-end customs to realize that, wait a second, yeah, this is $2,000, but this is a fundamentally different thing. A custom knife and a Sebenza are really, we call them both knives, but they're fundamentally different objects. And so I think handling a high-end custom knife, and particularly one of the handmade ones rather than like a CNC sort of affair, is a really nice thing for any reviewer or any gear geek in general to do, although certainly it can be very difficult. So yeah, there you go. Then finally, and I mean this not for comedic effect, but in all sincerity, you need to handle a real piece of crap or two. Something like your Z-Hunter or your Snap-on hardware store knife. Go down to a gas station. If you call yourself a knife collector, you need to go down to a gas station and buy something that's sitting in the rack underneath all the pipes. Because this gives you perspective in two different ways. First off, remember that for a majority of people in the world who like knives, this is what they're talking about. They love this knife because it cuts things, and it closes, and it opens, and it locks shut. And that's a beautiful thing. They don't have so much hedonic adaptation. They haven't become knife snobs like maybe, well, like certainly like me, maybe like you. But this helps you to remember what's going on for the most part for people who aren't crazy in the hobby like we are. Also, it gives you perspective because reality is really only interpretable through contrast. Without contrast, the world is all gray. You don't know happiness until you've felt despair. And you don't know hope until you've felt hopeless. You can't understand what hot means until you've felt cold. Otherwise, it's just the temperature that's everywhere. And similarly, I really don't feel like you can understand quality until you've really understood a Z-Hunter, until you see vertical blade play to this extent, or horizontal to this extent. You're not going to appreciate when it's not when it's not there in some of your higher end stuff. And so the piece of gas station crap isn't just a joke. It's not just a ha-ha, tee-hee, look, Nick loves Z-Hunters. This is a key part of my philosophy as a collector, and it's one of few things that I think is keeping me at least a little tiny bit sane, is looking at these guys and trying to see the good as well as the bad and the ugly, because they help me to see the good as well as the bad and ugly, even on the higher end. So there you go. I hope that was interesting for you, Drew. Like I said, I'm sure I left a bunch of stuff out of there. Don't hate me. Don't throw vegetables or anything at me. But, yeah, there you go. Hope this was interesting to you, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now. And I'm not kidding about the Z Hunter. I better see you at the gas station this weekend. Bye now.